All right, let's dive into one of the biggest corporate meltdowns of the early 2000s. We're talking about the massive accounting fraud at Rite Aid, a scandal that absolutely rocked the retail pharmacy world to its core.
And this is really the central question, isn't it? This story isn't just about fudging some numbers. It's about a corporate giant feeling the heat that decided to invent a fantasy of success. So how'd they pull it off? And maybe more importantly, why?
Just take a second and look at that number, $500 million. That's how much profit Rite Aid basically just made up. It's an unbelievable figure, and it represents a huge betrayal of everyone, investors, employees, and the public.
And here's what happens when a lie that big finally implodes. Once the truth got out, the stock price didn't just take a hit, it completely collapsed. It plummeted by 70%. So that $500 million in fake profits, it wiped out billions in real-world value for shareholders. Just gone.
So why would a company this big risk everything? Well, the answer lies in the absolutely brutal business environment of the late 90s, a time we can pretty much call the pharmacy wars.
You have to understand, Rite Aid wasn't some small-time player. It had grown aggressively since it was founded back in '62, gobbling up competitors like Revco until it had a whopping 4,000 stores. This was a beast of a company, and it had a reputation to uphold.
But that dominance was seriously under threat. You had these new, hungry rivals like Walmart and CVS storming into the pharmacy business. And they had deep pockets and a simple killer strategy: deep discounts. The pressure on Rite Aid to prove to Wall Street that it could still hang with the big dogs was just immense.
So that intense pressure, that was the motive. Now, let's get into the how, the actual tricks the executives used to conjure up $500 million in fake profits. This is where it gets really interesting. Their whole scheme really rested on this three-pronged attack. First, they played games with the payments they got from their suppliers. Second, they basically lied about how much their inventory was worth. And third, they just kicked the can down the road, hiding expenses to worry about later. Now, to really get this, you need to understand something called vendor rebates. It sounds a little technical, but it's simple. Think of it like a kickback a supplier gives to a store for selling a ton of their stuff. It's a totally normal part of business, but as you're about to see, it's also incredibly easy to abuse.
Okay, here it is, the heart of the scam. Normally, when you get that rebate money, you're supposed to account for it over the life of the contract. You spread it out. But Rite Aid's trick, they booked all of it, every last penny, as immediate revenue. Bam, an instant, massive, and totally fake boost to their profits. They did that, plus they lied about the value of their old inventory and just plain didn't record expenses for stuff like damaged goods. It all worked together to make the company look way, way healthier than it actually was.
You know, you can't keep a lie this big going forever. Eventually, that whole house of cards is going to come tumbling down. So let's look at how this entire scheme unraveled, and with some pretty shocking speed. In 2002, the music stopped. It all started with an internal probe. Just a few months later, the company had to go public and announce they were restating their earnings, which is basically corporate speak for, oops, we admit our profits were fake. The very next month, the SEC was at the door, filing a lawsuit against the executives who ran the whole show.
And the fallout was just swift and brutal. The fake profits? Gone. The stock? Crashed. The company got slammed with $200 million in fines. And for the first time on a scale like this, executive pay was clawed back, meaning they were forced to give back their fraudulent bonuses. The company was pushed right to the edge of bankruptcy.
And speaking of those clawbacks, get this number, $24 million. That's how much they took back from just one person, the former CEO, Martin Grass. It's in a huge message. You can't just profit from fraud and get away with it.
A scandal of this size doesn't just disappear. It leaves a permanent mark. And the Rite Aid fraud didn't just change the company. It changed the rules for all of corporate America. For Rite Aid, survival meant getting smaller. The company had no choice but to close 1,500 stores in just a couple of years. It was a painful retreat from its glory days, but it was what they had to do to stay afloat. But the biggest legacy was regulatory. The Rite Aid scandal, along with others you've probably heard of like Enron and WorldCom, led directly to a landmark law called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or SOX. It was designed specifically to stop this kind of thing from ever happening again. And a specific piece of that law, Section 302, was basically written because of what happened at Rite Aid. It now requires CEOs and CFOs to literally put their own signature on the line, to personally swear that their financial reports are true and accurate. The days of, oops, I didn't know, were officially over.
So the scandal is history. New laws were passed. But all of this brings us to one final, nagging question that's just as important today as it was 20 years ago. So, did we really learn our lesson from the Rite Aid fiasco? Sure, SOX makes executives sign on the dotted line, but the competitive pressures on these pharmacy giants have only gotten more intense. And with these complex rebate systems still at the heart of their business model, you really have to wonder, is the system actually more transparent, or have the games just gotten more sophisticated?